By the spring of 1944, something had begun to feel wrong inside the American advance across Western Europe. On paper, the U.S. Army had momentum. After breaking out of Normandy, General George S. Patton's Third Army was moving fast, exploiting gaps in German defenses, pushing east through northern France with speed that surprised even Allied planners. Fuel was flowing. Ammunition was plentiful. Fresh divisions were arriving almost weekly. The maps on Patton's desk showed open roads, weak enemy concentrations, and clear objectives. But the reports coming back from the front told a different story. Entire platoons were being caught in prepared kill zones. Supply convoys were shelled within minutes of leaving staging areas. Infantry units advanced into villages only to find German machine guns already waiting, perfectly positioned behind stone walls and hedgerows. In several cases, American forces arrived at locations that intelligence had marked as lightly defended, only to discover that German units had withdrawn just moments earlier, leaving behind booby traps and pre-sighted artillery coordinates. The losses were not catastrophic in any single engagement. No single battle made headlines, but taken together, they formed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. In late May 1944, outside the town of Neufchâteau in eastern France, a battalion from the 90th Infantry Division moved forward under what was supposed to be light resistance. Their orders had been finalized less than 12 hours earlier. The approach route had been changed at the last minute to avoid suspected German observation posts. Yet, as the first companies crossed open ground, mortar fire fell with immediate accuracy. Machine guns opened from 3 directions. Within minutes, several squads were pinned down. Medics crawled through wheat fields to reach wounded men. The Germans had not stumbled onto their position. They had been waiting. Similar scenes played out again and again over the following weeks. Near Commercy, outside Nancy, along narrow farm roads in Lorraine, each time American units encountered defenses that appeared too deliberate, too well-timed to be coincidence. German troops seemed to know not just where the Americans were going, but when they would arrive. By early June, casualty lists were growing thicker. Young soldiers who had survived Normandy were being lost in engagements that should have been routine advances. Officers began quietly comparing notes. Battalion commanders noticed that German reactions often mirrored U.S. movements with uncanny precision. Artillery batteries were displaced just before American airstrikes. Roadblocks appeared on routes that had only been finalized hours earlier. Patton saw the same reports they did. At headquarters, he laid out maps across long tables and studied them late into the night. He reviewed after-action summaries, intercepted communications, and reconnaissance photos. He traced timelines with his finger, comparing when orders were issued to when German units responded. He called in intelligence officers and logistics staff, asking the same questions repeatedly. Was reconnaissance compromised? Had radio codes been broken? Were patrols being shadowed? Each answer came back the same. No confirmed breaches, no intercepted transmissions, no evidence of compromised encryption. The Third Army's operational security procedures were being followed. Briefings were limited to essential personnel, written orders were tightly controlled, radio traffic was minimal, and yet the Germans kept arriving first. The effect on morale was subtle but corrosive. Soldiers at the front began to feel as though they were walking into traps that had been set long before they arrived. Platoon leaders stopped trusting intelligence summaries. Company commanders delayed movements, waiting for confirmation that never seemed to come. Every hedgerow felt watched. Every village approach felt exposed. Patton, known for his confidence and bluntness, did not share his growing concern publicly. He continued pushing his army forward, issuing aggressive orders demanding speed. But privately, he became increasingly convinced that this was not a battlefield problem. It was an internal one. By mid-June 1944, he had assembled a small stack of files on his desk, engagement reports from separate divisions, convoy losses from different routes, timelines showing German withdrawals that matched American planning meetings almost hour for hour. When placed side by side, the pattern became impossible to dismiss. The enemy was not reacting to American movements. They were anticipating them. One incident in early July finally removed any remaining doubt. A mechanized infantry unit scheduled to advance through a wooded corridor near Pont-à-Mousson had its route altered just before departure due to muddy terrain. Only a handful of officers and support personnel knew about the change. Yet when the column moved out, German anti-tank guns were already positioned along the new path. 2 half-tracks were destroyed in the opening minutes. Several men were killed before the unit could pull back. There had been no aerial reconnaissance, no radio chatter, no visible scouts. Still, the Germans had known. That evening, Patton reviewed the operation in silence. He asked for a list of everyone who had access to the revised movement orders. Not just combat officers, but clerks, translators, drivers, and administrative staff. Anyone who had been in the room when the update was typed or distributed. The list was longer than expected. Over the previous months, as Allied forces liberated French towns and pushed eastward, U.S. installations had absorbed hundreds of civilian workers and auxiliary personnel. Some were local French hires. Others were displaced Europeans assigned to translation, clerical work, food preparation, and vehicle maintenance. Among them were German women who had been separated from retreating units, surrendered, or presented themselves as refugees. They worked in kitchens, in offices, at typewriters. They cleaned floors, filed paperwork, carried messages between departments. They were considered low risk. Patton began quietly cross-referencing access logs with operational leaks. He noted which versions of orders had been typed on which machines, which staff members had handled which documents. He compared German reactions to specific briefing schedules. The conclusion forming in his mind was deeply unsettling. If his assessment was correct, the Third Army was not simply facing a skilled enemy. It was being betrayed from within. He did not announce his suspicions. He did not order mass arrests. He did not confront his staff. Instead, he did what he had always done when faced with uncertainty. He planned. By the second week of July 1944, Patton was no longer trying to determine whether there was a leak. He was preparing to prove it. Patton knew that confronting the suspected traitors directly would risk panic and compromise the investigation. Instead, he devised a plan that relied on careful observation, misdirection, and precision. Rather than issuing standard operational orders, he prepared several slightly different versions of the same upcoming offensive, each containing unique details about troop movements, timings, and supply routes. These decoy plans were carefully distributed among various clerical staff, translators, and auxiliary workers, some of whom he now suspected might be passing information to the enemy. Over the following days, the results were telling. Only one version of the plan seemed to reach the Germans. Every movement, every artillery placement, every timing indicated in that version was anticipated by enemy forces. Convoys were ambushed at the predicted points, machine guns waited precisely where the decoy had indicated, and German defensive positions seemed eerily synchronized. Patton's suspicions had been correct. The leaks were coming from inside his own installations. With the evidence mounting, counterintelligence teams were brought in discreetly. Surveillance began on the staff who had access to the compromised plans, focusing particularly on several German women employed as clerks, typists, and translators. These women had blended into the background, appearing harmless, even helpful, as they moved through offices and kitchens. But behind the scenes, they had been relaying information back to German command, providing details that were costing American lives on the front lines. Patton orchestrated a final test to confirm their guilt. A false plan, containing minute but critical details, was deliberately prepared and passed through the same channels. Within hours, German forces acted in exact accordance with the fabricated information. This confirmed the source of the leaks, and teams moved in to apprehend the women quietly without alerting the rest of the staff. Their network, operating under the cover of routine administrative work, was dismantled in one calculated operation. The immediate effect was dramatic. Subsequent offensives regained the element of surprise. Ambushes stopped. Supply convoys moved with far less risk. Soldiers reported increased confidence, no longer walking into defenses that seemed prearranged. Patton, however, never publicized the details. The arrests were kept quiet, records sealed, and only a few senior intelligence officers knew the full story. He understood that the appearance of calm and control was just as important as the action itself. For those who remained unaware of the betrayal, The war continued in the fields and towns of France and Germany, fought with tanks, rifles, and artillery. But Patton's subtle counterintelligence operation had ensured that the front lines were no longer being undermined from within. Lives were saved, and the momentum of the Third Army remained unbroken. In the end, the story of these German traitors served as a reminder that warfare was not only fought on battlefields, it was waged in offices, typing rooms, kitchens, and behind every desk where sensitive information passed from one hand to another. The enemy often hid in plain sight, waiting for the smallest opportunity, and it took a mind like Patton's, observant, patient, and decisive, to uncover the hidden threats and turn the tide. Sometimes victory is not in the battles fought openly, but in the secrets exposed quietly, in the calculated patience that ensures betrayal is met with justice before it can strike again. If stories like this matter to you and you want them to reach more people, please consider liking the video. Your support helps keep these moments from being forgotten.